They were known as the 300, but their story is far more complex. This is the chronicle of their defiance.
The demand was absolute. Earth and water.
The symbols of unconditional surrender.
In 481 BC, envoys of Xerxes, the Persian king of kings, carried this ultimatum across the Greek world.
Many cities submitted. But this was not diplomacy. It was a death warrant. In Athens, the envoys were executed. In Sparta, they were thrown into a well.
For two cities, surrender was not an option.
From this vantage point, Themistocles, the man who built these walls, surveyed his legacy and the future of the Hellenic world.
This was defiance.
It was orchestrated by two radically different men.
First, Themistocles of Athens.
The strategist. His instrument was not the spear, but silver.
The silver mines of Laurion.
He used this wealth to build an instrument of salvation, the Athenian fleet. His ambition was to save Greece with a sea prong.
Stripped of title within these walls, Leonidas was merely a soldier. Yet the weight of his counterpart, Leonidas of Sparta. The tactician.
His instrument was the law.
The brutal, unbending Spartan code.
His mandate, defend the land prong.
And fulfill an oracle that foretold a king's death.
This was the great king's answer. An army drawn from 20 nations.
This was the theater of war.
The Persian host was a force of nature.
An avalanche of nations. Advancing by land and sea.
To stop this, the Hellenic Congress conceived a master plan.
A symbiotic operation. It was not about one battle.
It was about two.
Thermopylae. The Hot Gates. A narrow, almost
Olon Labe.
the land from a blocking force at the narrow pass of Thermopylae. The Hot Gates.
The Sea Frog.
A naval blockade at the Straits of Artemisium. This was Themistocles' grand strategy. The two prongs were one body. They could not function apart. The army guarded the fleet's flank. The fleet guarded the army's supply. If one prong failed, the other was doomed. And the man chosen to hold the land was Leonidas. Deconstructing the myth. We must deconstruct the myth.
First, the Persian instrument.
Herodotus claimed Xerxes led 5 million men. This is fantasy.
The logistical reality?
An army is constrained by the water it can drink and the food it can carry. A massive, multi-ethnic force. But it was not a tide of demons.
For the Spartan, the Xiphos was more than steel. It was the extension of his will, a promise of bronze and blood in the narrow pass.
Now, the Greek instrument.
The legend says 300.
The reality, nearly 7,000 men.
A pan-Hellenic alliance.
Spartans, yes, but also Thespians, Thebans, Phocians, and more. Their true weapon was not numbers. It was a combination of two things.
First, the phalanx.
A wall of bronze, wood, and iron.
Second, the terrain.
The pass at Thermopylae was barely 15 meters wide. It was a force multiplier that neutered the Persian cavalry and rendered their vast numbers irrelevant.
Xerxes had to fight on Leonidas' terms.
Day 1 at Thermopylae. Here, the Greeks stood united, their shields a bulwark against the greatest empire the world had ever seen.
This was the crucible moment. This was the beginning. Day 1 of an age unlike any before it.
For 2 days, the pass held.
Xerxes, watching from his throne.
Grew frustrated.
He sent in the Meges.
They broke against the Greek spears.
He sent in the Kissians.
They too were cut down. The Greeks stood, a wall of bronze, rotating their front ranks to rest the weary.
Day 2. The siege continued, the outcome still uncertain.
Finally, the Immortals.
The 10,000 elite heavy infantry of the king.
They were thrown into the narrow pass. And they were cut to pieces.
The Spartans used a terrifying tactic. The feigned retreat.
They would pretend to break.
Lure the Persians into a chaotic charge.
And then, on command, turn and slaughter them. The pass had neutralized Xerxes' greatest weapon.
Hold the line! The land prong was holding.
But a fortress. Is only as strong as its weakest point. The true enemy appeared. It was not just the traitor, Ephialtes. He was a symptom of a divided Greece. He showed the Immortals the Thermopylae path.
A goat track that bypassed the hot gates.
He stared at the path, the one weakness in their defense. But Leonidas already knew what awaited them there. But betrayal alone did not seal their fate. Leonidas knew about the path. He had posted a guard, 1,000 men, all of them Phocians. This was the catastrophic military blunder.
In the eerie silence before the dawn, a single rustle betrayed their presence.
The Phocians.
When the Immortals appeared in the pre-dawn fog.
The Phocians panicked. Συντάχθετε! Αναστηλείτε! They believed the Persians were there for them.
They abandoned the path, retreating to a nearby hill to save themselves.
East!
But Hydarnes, the Persian commander, watched the retreat unfold with cold, professional disdain.
Point ignored them.
The tactical collapse was total. The Phocians abandoned their post, and the Immortals simply walked past them.
They now stood at Leonidas's back.
The hot gates were flanked. The trap was sprung.
He knew this sunrise would be his last. With the weight of Sparta upon him,
This was the real last stand.
at dawn, Leonidas held a council.
The situation was hopeless.
His order was not a suicide pact. It was a rational, tactical decision. Retreat.
He dismissed the bulk of the army. Sending thousands of men south to fight another day.
But he would stay.
The 300 Spartans remained to fulfill their law.
And with them, 400 Thebans.
Kept, perhaps, as hostages. But tragically, 700 Thespians also stayed. They were not bound by an oracle. To die beside the Spartans.
This was not a myth. It was a calculated, successful rearguard action that saved over 3,000 men.
The legend would remember the 300. History must remember the 700. The fighting ceased. The shouting died. Only the wind now mourns the...
The immediate consequence was disaster.
Thermopylae was a military debacle.
The land prong was broken. at Artemisium, its flank exposed, was forced to withdraw.
Athens itself was sacked and burned.
As the great city succumbed to the flames, all seemed lost.
So why do we remember it?
Herodotus wrote of a rational defense, a strategic sacrifice.
Later, Diodorus wrote of a glorious, suicidal charge.
The legend of Thermopylae is the fusion of these two ideas. A tactical defeat, but a profound moral victory.
It was the propaganda, the heroic tale of Thermopylae that Themistocles wielded to forge their resolve. Here, on the plains of Plataea, they would decide the fate of Greece. The memory of Thermopylae fueled their rage.
Point that ultimately saved Western civilization.
Welcome to the Chronicle of Defiance. Throughout history, the struggle for freedom has always left its mark.
Whose conquest chronicle should we reconstruct next? Nominate a new commander in the comments.